Thank you for staying with us. The death toll from the migrant shipwreck off Italy's southern coast on Sunday now stands at 65 after the discovery of another body. 14 children were among those confirmed to have died when their overcrowded boat hit the rocks at high speed. 79 people survived, while several more are believed to still be missing. It was one of the most tragic incidents in the central Mediterranean Sea, which thousands of mostly African migrants and asylum seekers cross each year, hoping to find a new life in Europe. Here's how one of the witnesses described the tragedy.
Vincenzo Luciano is telling us he raced to the beach from his house, which is nearby, jumped into the water with his clothes on, and pulled out a little boy. He's a fisherman here at Staccato di Cutro, Italy, the scene of that massive shipwreck on Sunday that killed at least 67 migrants trying to cross into Europe, including children, and most of them from Afghanistan. He was one of the first to find the aftermath. Before dawn, he started pulling out bodies by the light of his friend's cell phone.
He was 2 or 3 years old. I pulled him out with his eyes still open, and I said, maybe I'll save him. When I got out of the water, I saw that foam was coming out of his mouth, so I had to close those eyes. When I close my eyes, I still see that child. I always think that if I had been there 1 minute, or 20 seconds earlier, perhaps I could have saved him. I feel guilty. A friend of mine was holding the lights for me while I was picking up the dead. We couldn't understand anything. There were people screaming. Mothers wanted to know if they were their children. They were pulling us, shouting, and I wasn't ready for this. I panicked, but as the hours passed, we saw more and more dead people.
It's still not clear what the total death toll of the disaster is, now days later. Authorities say there were about 80 survivors, but the Turkish sailboat they were using is thought to have had between 150 and 200 people aboard. Meanwhile, questions persist over the circumstances of the disaster, how authorities reacted to it, and it's brought renewed attention to illegal immigration in Italy and Europe as a whole. Luciano says he's not an expert and isn't sure if rescuers could have saved the victims given the rough seas, but that something could have been done. They weren't even 100 meters from the shore.
Now, to talk more on the African continent's immigration crisis, I'm now joined via video link from Kuwait by Khouloud Baghouri, the African Youth Ambassador for Peace. Khouloud, I appreciate your time this evening. Now, as an African Youth Ambassador, how do you view the recent tragedy off the coast of Calabria, where at least from what we understand, as many as 65 people have perished?
Thank you very much, Hugo, for the invitation. Of course, the tragic event that happened, which led to the death of so many people, is horrifying. And the last thing we ever wish for is to see more people dying by the sea. I think this explains how fragile the situation of people is becoming in terms of migration, and how they are very attached to the better life scenario that they keep on wishing for. And this is why they keep leaving their countries due to so many factors. This is absolutely sad because we are seeing high numbers of migrants every day, and human traffickers even more. So this goes to saying how weak the migration rules are becoming, and how fragile our policies are.
Well, this migration dates back to the 60s. You know, we've monitored how it's happened over time, especially when they migrate from Africa to Europe. We talk about Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia in particular. Have the reasons for migration evolved over time?
Definitely so many reasons. I think throughout the years, the reasons have been becoming even more complex and delicate to deal with. I think for so many years we have seen the political situations in the north region, I would say, especially The fact that most of these countries have faced challenging and difficult scenarios in the past 10 years and more. Recently, I think with the climate change, migration has become even more high with rates and numbers. Terrorism, political instability, as I mentioned, and recently COVID-19. Of course, there are so many other factors that are leading for the North Africans to migrate even more. Better life, as I said, the search for a brighter future, and the fact that they see that there is a more safe and stable environment for them on the other side. But unfortunately, most of the times we see a lot of young people, and now families, even children, are on the boats risking their lives to go to the other side. I would say severe food insecurity as well. The overall factors that are becoming more complex are making more people, from young people to families to children, migrate to the other side.
Now, how can Europe and Africa work together to avert the sort of disaster that we've experienced? Now, while these migrants weren't coming from Africa, but all too often, in fact, every few weeks, there's a report of migrants coming off various coasts of Africa attempting to sail to Spain, for instance, and these are some of the challenges that they face. How can the two continents, if you will, work together to avert these crises?
I think there is a contradiction in a way or another between the EU and African relations, I would say, because in one hand, the European countries support the free movement agreements and policies of the African continent, but at the same time, they are imposing more migratory policies or regulations in a way or another that do not align with the vision of the free movement agreements. I think also, as much as the European states support African continental agendas in promoting the free access in the continent, they promote policies that weaken these agendas through the cooperation with the African states that aimed at concentrated movement of people. I think we need to see a harmonized vision between both the European countries and the African countries in a way that we know that not only the citizens will be protected, their rights will be protected, but at the same time the access would be more or less flexible. And both visions can meet where both countries should make sure they should actually contribute to a more peaceful future for them in a way that when they think about migrating, they know that they have their rights will be preserved, and they migrate in a much more coherent and organized ways.
Now, migration, climate change, peace and security are some of your core areas of expertise. And some of the individuals that are most impacted by migration are women and children. Now, talk to us about the impact that migration has on women and children in particular.
Definitely, women, I would say by women, young girls and women as well are at particular risks because they are considered the most vulnerable groups in the face of climate change. As you know, climate change impacts more than one area. We are talking about food security. We are talking about the overall water access, agriculture sector, and so many more. So women are blocked by accessing so many things, and their rights are not being preserved. So in a way or another, climate change is not helping women access or advance in any way. And they are always left, even in the midst of a natural disaster, we are seeing that women are at risk because they are not even in their capacity to protect themselves enough. So I think there is a high need right now, an emergency, to consider empowering women in a way or another that they are well capacitated or prepared to face the impacts of climate change today. They need to have access to natural resources. They need to be empowered in a way where they can access their capacities as equal as men to be actually well empowered in a way that they preserve their rights. Climate change is also impacting young girls as children as well, because they are actually abusing their rights. They are growing in an unstable environment. They are witnessing conflict. They are witnessing an unstable environment, a changing environment every day. This can actually impact their physical and mental well-being. So we are not building a generation that is very well stable. We are actually building a generation that can be traumatized by these events, by the conflict zones, by the climate change, by the migration scenarios that we see every day. I think now we need to consider protecting these groups' rights as well, and not to only focus on building policies broadly, but to make them more categorized in a way that they are being gender inclusive, or we have the gender mainstreaming aspect in them.
Now, finally, as a young person, what message do you have for young people who are on the continent who are looking to promote peace, security, and social justice? How can they better be supported on the continent?
If there's anything that I have witnessed in the past few years, is that young people are becoming more vocal in terms of expressing their needs, expressing their demands. They are owning the space even more. We have seen recently in so many spaces, especially at the African Union, how young people are accessing the different platforms, and they are sharing the same room with decision makers and key stakeholders. I think that we are on the right path of changing the narratives. We are demanding more peaceful countries. We are asking for a peaceful continent. We are building the policies today with the stakeholders. I think my message would be to be more vocal about what you need, how you want to build a vision for the continent you wish to see, the Africa we want, a prosperous, healthier, resilient continent where governance is implemented on the right basis, where we have also the right to speak up when things are not working in our favor. So believe in yourself, of course, stay empowered, look for ways to be capacitated, but most importantly, make sure to stay active on the ground, to continue to ask for your rights and demand them when is the right time.
Khouloud, appreciate your time. And that was the Africa Youth Ambassador for Peace, Khouloud Baghouri.